Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to the Explainer. If you are planning a getaway on the high seas anytime soon, while you really need to pay close attention to what we're looking at today, it seems the high seas are coming with some extremely high fees. Based on some fascinating and honestly slightly concerning new reporting from Cruise Hive, we're seeing a massive wave of hidden cost increases sweeping across the cruise industry for 2026. Now, these aren't the headline ticket prices you see on the billboards. These are the daily fees quietly adding up behind the scenes.
So I have to ask, is your 2026 cruise budget already completely outdated? I mean, it's a question we all need to ask our wallets right now. Let's be absolutely clear right out of the gate. Crew members work exceptionally hard and they absolutely deserve their tips and gratuities. No question about it. But from a purely financial perspective, rapidly rising mandatory rates are making vacation budgeting a real challenge. Think about it. If you booked your cruise 6 months ago, the math you did back then might already be completely wrong.
And the reason your math might be wrong? Well, it basically comes down to this number right here, 5. Because as of early 2026, 5 major cruise lines have already aggressively pushed through some pretty significant gratuity and service fee hikes. This isn't just a one-off thing. We're looking at a widespread industry shift.
So here's our roadmap for the Explainer. First, we'll cover the big 5 rate hikes. Second, specialty dining surcharges. Third, we'll uncover something called the legacy rate hack. Fourth, calculating your total costs. And finally, what's next for cruisers?
All right, part 1, the big 5 rate hikes.
What's absolutely crucial to understand as we unpack all this data is that the scope of these increases varies wildly from one cruise line to the next. Take a look at these two extremes. Margaritaville at Sea, which is a boutique cruise line, jumped its standard stateroom rate up to a staggering $22 per person per day. That is an industry high for a standard room. Now compare that to MSC Cruises, where their elite, ultra-exclusive yacht club suite rate is $23. When a standard room on one line costs almost the exact same as a luxury suite on another, yeah, the pricing landscape is definitely shifting.
The devil is truly in the details here, so let's break it down. Margaritaville at Sea actually kicked this off on February 1st, bumping standard rooms to $22 and suites to $25. Then, Carnival Cruise Line followed on April 2nd, raising rates by $1 across the board, making it $17 for standard rooms and $19 for suites. MSC Cruises? They're moving to $17 for standard and $23 for their yacht club. Over at Holland America Line, effective June 1st, you're looking at $18 for standard and $20 for suites. And finally, Princess Cruises rolled out similar fleet-wide changes, bringing standard to $18 and suites to $20.
Now, interestingly enough, MSC Cruises doesn't even call them gratuities. They use the term hotel service charge. But for MSC specifically, there is a massive geographical caveat you need to be aware of. This $17 rate hike, it only applies to North American sailings, specifically the Caribbean and Alaska. If you're sailing MSC over in Europe, this specific increase actually doesn't affect you at all.
Moving right along to part 2, specialty dining surcharges. Unfortunately, those daily room gratuities are really only half the story. We kind of have to brace ourselves for a double whammy when it comes to onboard amenity fees. For years, the industry standard for automatic service fees, the ones on drinks packages or a nice steakhouse dinner, was 18%. But Holland America, Princess, and Carnival have officially bumped this automatic service charge up to a flat 20%. That means every soda, every single cocktail, every specialty meal just got 2% more expensive before you even take a sip or a bite.
Let's be real about these mandatory surcharges. Whether it's Holland America or Princess, these fees apply heavily to your dining and beverages. But the absolute most important takeaway for you here is that these rates are strictly non-adjustable. While some cruise lines might let you visit guest services to adjust daily room gratuities based on the service you received, these 20% specialty service fees are completely locked in. You literally cannot remove them. It's a hard cost added straight to your bill.
Okay, let's look at some good news in part 3, the legacy rate hack.
Okay, everybody take a breath. Now that we know exactly what we're up against, let's talk about a proactive solution that savvy travelers are calling the legacy rate hack. When a cruise line announces a price hike, they usually give you a little grace period. So step 1, book your cruise early. Step 2, pay close attention to cruise news and prepay your gratuities the very moment a hike is announced, before the deadline hits. And step 3, by doing this, you legally lock in the previous lower rate, regardless of when you actually set sail. Carnival Cruise Line actually did this back in early February, giving guests a nice window to prepay and save some cash.
And the best part, this hack doesn't just apply to daily room tips.
Take this specific anecdote from Carnival. Their Bottomless Bubbles unlimited soda package jumped from $9.50 to $11.99 per adult per day. But the guests who pre-purchased the package online before the implementation date, they got to keep that $9.50 rate. The lesson here is pretty clear. Paying attention to early announcements and prepaying your extras is pretty much the ultimate defense against inflation at sea.
Which brings us to part 4, calculating your total cost.
This all brings us to a really vital shift in how we need to think about vacation planning before we even pack our bags. There's a quote directly from the Cruise Hive report that just perfectly encapsulates the situation. Higher and higher gratuity rates can really damage a cruise vacation budget. It really validates the frustration a lot of consumers are feeling right now. While we're remaining totally objective about the numbers here, we just have to acknowledge the reality that a quote-unquote cheap base fare can quickly balloon once you factor in $20 a day per person plus 20% on every single drink.
So, what should you take away from all this? Honestly, you need defense tactics. Please do not try to do this math in your head. You need to use online gratuity calculators and dedicated drinks package calculators, many of which are easily available for free on cruise news sites. You absolutely must forecast your total, comprehensive spend before you ever step foot on the gangway. Utilizing these tools is the only way to ensure there is no absolute shock when you receive your final folio on the very last morning of your trip.
Finally, let's look ahead in Part 5. What's next for cruisers?
Let's move on and see how this builds into the immediate future of the cruise industry. There is some good news, for now anyway. Major players like Disney Cruise Line, Royal Caribbean, Norwegian Cruise Line, and Celebrity Cruises haven't announced any 2026 gratuity hikes yet. They're holding their ground. However, history tells us that the cruise industry operates heavily on a domino effect. Once a few major lines test the waters with higher rates and the market accepts it, it's incredibly common for the rest to just quietly follow suit.
But I do need to leave you with a pretty stark warning. While we talked about that awesome legacy rate hack earlier, it is absolutely not a guarantee. Gratuity rate increases are not always announced in advance with a generous grace period. Furthermore, cruise lines don't always offer the option to prepay and lock in the old rate. These policies can, and honestly do, change overnight without warning.
Which leaves us with this final, absolutely critical question. Are you prepared for the next unannounced rate hike? I highly recommend you double-check your current booking details, run your numbers to an online calculator, and definitely consider prepaying your package today. Knowledge is power, and when it comes to travel, knowledge is also money saved. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Stay sharp out there, and happy sailing.